And so the charm was made, a warning, a reminder. We must be more than instinct. What memory do you bring? Find the forgotten. Search for the past. Welcome to the cradle. I am Axum, and I listen to the voice of the cradle. I carry knowledge that is hidden to even most Haranir. The goddess's memories have been shared with me, and I share them only with those who understand their importance. Continue to learn about the Haranir and our history. I am interested to see if you and perhaps another are worthy of those memories.
Anaria Sholah, treat my wares with care.
The beauty of Eversong endures. We have made many sacrifices.
With perseverance, strength, we shall not falter.
My goods are one of a kind. Are you planning a purchase? Return when you need more.
There is much to be done. If needed, I will answer the call.
Oraga Hashura. Always welcome among the Weatherback. there now, go friend?
into those puddles. Next up is the main caster in this area and the arcane magisters. These guys have an important interrupt in polymorph, which you want to make sure you grab. Technically, if this targets a non-healer, you can dispel it since it is a magic debuff, but I recommend interrupting if possible. Plus, they have a random target bolt, which you'll want to use spare interrupts on. The main mob for tanks to worry about is the Sunblade Enforcer, as they gain a really nasty magic buff called Arcane Blade, empowering their melees. So if you have a purge in your group, it is really valuable to remove this. Your tanks will be very happy, I promise. There is another caster that has no interrupts in the Lightward Healer. These guys will just put out debuffs onto random players in Holy Fire. This is a magic dot, so you can dispel it, and part of why I recommend using a Root Break on the previously discussed tank magic dot. Their other ability is Power Word Shield, which will put a magic buff on an ally as an absorb shield. So if you have excess purges, you can clear that, but I do recommend prioritizing purging that Arcane Blade. Eventually, you'll make your way into a library, which not only contains a couple new mobs to fight, but also is full of patrolling librarians, which you do need to avoid, otherwise they'll send you back to the library entrance. On top of this, there's also an arcane tome in this library gauntlet that any player can run over to collect, granting the entire group a 5% haste buff for 30 minutes, which persists through death, so basically the entire rest of the dungeon, so make sure you're on the lookout for that. As for the trash mobs here, first are the animated codex, which just occasionally pulse for AoE damage thanks to arcane volley, so make sure you don't pull too many of them, as it's easy to overwhelm your healer, especially in combination with the new lieutenant mob, the blazing pyromancer, who will buff themselves with ignition, dealing even more pulse and group damage over the 10-second duration. Outside of that, this mob will just create a flame strike circle that you want to avoid, and it'll do a random target pyroblast cast, which you want to make sure is always interrupted. Once you defeat the Pyromancer, a secret door will open up and you can head out into a courtyard, which has a couple more new mobs we can cover. First is the Spell-Woven Familiar, which just has an AoE group hit in Blink. It doesn't sound like it does anything, but trust me, it does do some damage, so be careful, especially if it overlaps with any other source of group or individual damage. One of those sources are the Bright Scale Worms. These mobs come in quite large numbers, and on death they will use energy release to trigger a group hit, while also buffing people with a 1% stacking, healing, and damage increase. So you want to try and take advantage of this buff without blowing up your group by killing them all at the same time. Outside of the trash in this area, there's also a few energy crystals scattered around, which players can interact with to drain, granting them a short damage and healing buff. Generally, it's not worth going out of your way to grab these, but they can be a nice little boost if you have cooldowns going into the next pack, or even the boss, Arcanatron Kustos, who we can talk about now. This fight is all about space management, as the boss rotates between the main phase and an intermission phase, where in both there's going to be puddles that spawn which last for 2 minutes. In the main phase, these are created directly under the boss when he casts Arcane Expulsion, which also does a moderate group hit and knockback at the same time, so try not to get pushed into any existing puddles, and note that you can use the terrain such as the stairs or the walls in this room to prevent that pushback if needed. Tanks will want to make sure they position the boss towards the outside of the room here, overlapping existing puddles in order to maximize space. On top of that, you want to be aware of the Tank Buster in Repulsing Slam, which also has a knockback attached to it, so again, watch your positioning and use a defensive. Otherwise, the only other ability in the boss phase is Ethereal Shackles, which puts a magic dot and root on 2 random players, similar to the tank one we discussed earlier, so use dispels or freedom effects to clear it. When the boss reaches 0 energy, he begins the intermission with Refueling Protocol, becoming stationary and taking 20% increased damage for 20 seconds, while also pulling energy orbs from around the room towards him. If these reach the boss, they grant a stacking 20% damage buff, so players want to make sure they're intercepting these to prevent that from happening, which causes one of those puddles to form on the ground, while also applying a stacking 3-second dot to the soaker. So you want to make sure everyone is spreading out and helping with these soaks, and you aren't letting your stacks get too high without a defensive press. This phase is a lot easier if you're soaking from a single direction, so if possible, try to bring the boss towards a corner of the room before it begins, otherwise it just repeats from there. Now, between this boss and the next one, there's actually only a single new mob to cover in Rune Spellbreakers, but these guys are important as they have a dangerous Runic Glaive ability, which targets 2 players and leaves a nasty dot on them, so be ready with defensives and spot healing when this goes out. They also have a tank targeted in frontal and shield slam, so make sure this is pointed away from your group and you step out of the effect yourself. Eventually, you'll reach the end of a hallway where you'll encounter Serenal Sunlash, a fight where you'll consistently be interacting with the suppression zone he drops underneath himself shortly after being engaged and intermittently throughout the fight. Well, inside you are pacified, so you don't want to stay there permanently, but it will help you counter a couple of his abilities, starting with Runic Mark, which is very similar to that previously mentioned Runic Glaive ability, but this will also cause the two targeted players to deal splash damage around them, so you want to make sure that you are loosely spread out to prevent this. This dot also has no duration, and it can only be removed by touching that previously mentioned suppression zone, which also does a hit of group damage and spawns some circles to avoid at the same time. So make sure you are staggering your detonations here to give your healer some time to get players topped between them. The other important ability is Wave of Silence, which is a large also dangerous with defensives and it away from play where you step out of the effect yourself. Eventually, you'll reach the end of a hallway where you'll encounter Serenal Sunlash, a fight where you'll consistently be interacting with the suppression zone he drops underneath himself shortly after being engaged and intermittently throughout the fight. Well, inside you are pacified, so you don't want to stay there permanently, but it will help you counter a couple of his abilities, starting with Runic Mark, which is very similar to that previously mentioned Runic Glaive ability, but this will also cause the two targeted players to deal splash damage around them, so you want to make sure that you are loosely spread out to prevent this. This dot also has no duration, and it can only be removed by touching that previously mentioned suppression zone, which also does a hit of group damage and spawns some circles to avoid at the same time. So make sure you are staggering your detonations here to give your healer some time to get players topped between them. The other important ability is Wave of Silence, which is a large group hit that will pacify you for 8 seconds unless you're inside that suppression zone when it goes off. so you want to make sure that you quickly step into it just before that cast completes. Outside of that, there is a pretty nasty tank ability in Hastening Ward, a magic buff on the boss that increases attack speed and causes them to deal bonus magic damage, so bringing a purge and removing that buff whenever you see it makes your tank's life a lot easier. After defeating this boss, you can channel into the Sinister of Twilight above him, causing several new void mobs to spawn that you then need to fight your way through in order to get to the third boss. Starting out with the main caster, it's the dreaded Voidwalker. They just have a random target bolt and shadow bolt, so use as many interrupts on that to reduce your group's damage intake. One of the big lieutenants is the Shadow Rift Voidcaller, and these guys will spawn a bunch of mobs with Call of the Void, so make sure tanks pick them up and they get cleaved down. Otherwise, they deal heavy group damage with Consuming Shadows, which also heals the mob, so make sure you're ready with healing, or you can also LOS this ability to prevent the damage entirely. The most important interrupt by far in this area comes from the Void Infusers, who will attempt to cast Terror Wave. This will fear everyone in your group, which is obviously very, very bad, so make sure you assign a kick to each of those mobs. These guys will also throw out Consuming Void debuffs on random players, so be ready with Magic Dispels to remove it. The last big lieutenant mob in this area are the Devouring Tyrants, and these guys have a really nasty tank hit in Devouring Strike, which also puts a massive healing absorb on the tank, so be ready with defensives and any major forms of self-healing if you have them. They also occasionally throw out Void Bombs onto random players, which do a healing absorb and splash to nearby allies, so do your best to avoid your friends if you're targeted by this ability. Once you clear the courtyard outside the library, you'll be able to take on Gemellis, which is an interesting encounter that ramps up over the course of the fight, as the boss will create clones of itself with triplicate that you can cleave for full damage, but will also mirror ability cast as they patrol around the room untankable. This happens once right at the start to give you 3 total targets, and then again at 50% health for 5 targets, meaning at that point your entire group gets targeted by every single spell cast, so saving damage for 50% and below will definitely be helpful. In terms of what the abilities are, there's 3 to be aware of, which always happen in the same order, starting with Cosmic Sting, which is just a hit of damage that drops a puddle underneath the target when the projectile contacts them, so try and drop this away from the main path if possible. Following this, the boss and the clones will gain a shield and debuff players with Neural Link, causing them to take 20% more damage for 12 seconds, or until they touch the clone they are linked to, indicated by an arrow underneath your feet, which also removes their absorb shield in the process, so try and do this as quickly as you can, not only to maximize damage, but also because it can be dangerous to clear during the next ability, Astral Grasp. When this channel starts, it creates an AoE around the boss and all of the clones, while each of them also pulls a random player towards them, so you want to make sure you're fighting against this grip. Otherwise, when this ends, the 3 abilities just keep repeating until the boss is down. Once you've defeated Gemellis, you can head up the tower towards Degentrius, where you'll encounter the exact same void mobs we just discussed, nothing new to worry about. That means we can head straight into the final boss, where I hope your group is good at volleyball, because that is what this fight is all about. If you look at the arena itself, you'll see 4 statues, which will divide the room into quadrants with a void torrent beam that stuns anyone who touches it. So before engaging the boss, you want to make sure you spread out with at least 1 person per quadrant. I recommend having your tank alone in one, your healer and a DPS beside them, and then a DPS alone in each of the last 2. Where the volleyball comes in is the Unstable Void Essence cast, which creates a soak in one of the quadrants that will apply a party-wide dot if missed, or just hit the soaker if they get it, and then it'll bounce to a new quadrant that it hasn't already been in for a total of 4 bounces, or 1 in each quadrant, hence why we spread our group out. To make this more difficult, the boss will be debuffing players with Devouring Entropy, a dot that has varying lengths and will shoot out orbs on expiration, which slow anyone they hit, so do your best to avoid these. As for the tank, the main ability is Hulking Fragment, which does an 8-yard AoE around you and debuffs you with Umbral Splinters, a 30-second magic dot which leaves behind a puddle on removal or expiration. This is why I recommend having your tank alone in their area, but also still relatively close to the healer, because they'll need to back away from the boss when this goes out, so that they can get magic dispelled away from the boss and drop that puddle outside of melee range. Note that while the boss is stationary, he does not actually melee in any way. Instead, he just shoots out entropy blasts at the tank for physical damage, so you are free to leave melee range at any time without worrying about some party wipe mechanic. that is it for this dungeon, guys. Hopefully this guide was useful, and if it was, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like it. As always, thank you to my amazing Patreons for their continued support. And before we go, a quick word from this video.
The terrace holds what we require to gain entry to the Void Storm. The Cynosure of Twilight.
You were warned, Umbric. The terrace is forever closed to you. Now leave before...
Of course he left a message for me. I'm afraid you'll have to incapacitate the guards. How I've missed this library. But we can't afford to linger here. To think Ramath would go this far to keep me out.
Have a pleasant
You'll go no further, Umbric. These new defenses were specially made with you in mind.
I seem to be detained. The construct ahead is heightening Rameth's spellwork. Destroy it!
All students must follow policy. Policy demands compliance. Suppressive measures necessary. Enjoy detainment. Compliance is not optional. Proceeding with impairment. Refueling. Please stand by. Resuming disciplinary measures. Compliance is not optional. Security failure.
A crude solution, but effective. The Cynosure should be just ahead. Saranel, stand down. I have permission from Lorthamar himself.
Liar! None shall lay hands on the Cynosure! The Cynosure remains here! Dilf all!
Restrain him. I'll take care of these shields.
Marked for defeat! Speak no more! Let this serve as a warning. I am unrelenting. Your fall is written. Silence! Marked for defeat! Speak no more! I am unrelenting! You shall not...
Help me remove the wards around the Cynosure.
Saranel, the void has broken through. We... You dare? Then die!
Champion, I know what to do. I'll need to attune the Cynosure to the Void Storm. What is that monstrosity? You keep it occupied while I channel the spell and end this chaos.
You dare? Then die! Shadow sealed in darkness. No passage. Darkness devours. Scattering shadows. Umbral cascade. Darkness devours. Scattering shadows. Umbral cascade. The void hungers. Scattering shadows. Shadows surge. The void you.
It is done. We have our way into the Void Storm. Let us inform Lorthamar. And perhaps offer an apology for the near catastrophe.
Greetings. Fight with courage.
Pleasantries can wait. Remain vigilant.
Honored to meet you. Stay vigilant. I offer you my aid. May you find what you seek. Go carefully.
The Twilight's blade are sabotaging our lumberyard again. Save what light wood you can find and hit them back hard.
Honored by your presence, Alas is favored. Alas, he bless you.
Do not end them yet. Savor the hunt, and let the artifact consume their fear.
Do you need protection? It is an honor to battle beside you. I'll watch your back. I fight for the Witherbark. You got orders, Hashura? The bite of the Lex Loa protect you. Bright-eyed Shadow bless your hunt. Nago soldier.
You got orders, Hashora? It is an honor to battle beside you. Oraka, friend of Halazi. Do you need protection? May Halazi hide you from your enemies.
Listening. A fair wind brought you to me, eh? Talk over me. Well done.